The champagne bottle slipped an inch in her grip the instant the old man's cane tapped her in step. "Pour for me, little bird," Don Antonio Greco murmured in the lost, guttural dialect of the Aspremont Highlands, a language no outsider had heard spoken aloud in Brooklyn since the Christmas raid of 1989. "And don't tremble, or I'll teach the Hudson how to swallow another secret." Every glass in La Lanterna stopped halfway to every mouth. The room, polished walnut, candlelight on Murano crystal, $1,200 Barbaresco breathing on every table, didn't merely quiet. It suffocated. Because the timid server who had just refilled water for the most lethal name east of Palermo didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She lifted her gaze, locked eyes with the Don, and answered in the same extinct mountain tongue, voice low and blade sharp. "The Hudson is already full of secrets, Don Antonio. One more frightened bird won't make it sing." The hush that followed wasn't silence. It was a held breath the entire restaurant shared. Only 4 people alive understood the exact words. And one of them, the Don, felt 20 years peel away from his face in a single heartbeat. This is the story of Isabella Greco, the shadow waitress who had spent 7 years concealing an empire beneath starched cotton and a name that wasn't hers. Friday service at La Lanterna was always a tightrope walk, but tonight the wire felt electrified. The staff had been briefed at shift change, mezzanine cleared, private entrance secured, no phones, no questions. The owner, normally invisible, had personally checked every table setting twice. Isabella knotted her apron tighter until it pressed against her ribs like armor. She kept her eyes down, movements small, face blank. 7 years of practice had turned her into scenery. Cash rent in Sunset Park, no socials, no last names on W-2s, never meeting anyone stare longer than it took to say more wine. Tonight the scenery felt hunted. Luca, the runner, brushed past her with a tray of empty flutes. "It's the Grecos." The whole council. Even the old lion flew in from Calabria. Isabella's pulse kicked hard against her throat. She forced her hands still. "Just pour and vanish," she breathed. The double doors parted like a wound. First the advance team, 7 shadows and Midnight Wool who catalogued every face in 2 seconds flat. Then Dante Greco, 39, crown prince in obsidian tailoring, all coiled economy and quiet menace. Behind him came the myth, Don Antonio Greco, 74, last of the old-world dons, walking with the aid of an ebony stick crowned by a silver falcon. The man who once ordered an entire hillside silenced for sheltering a single informant. The restaurant exhaled when the procession swept past the staff without pause. Until the Don halted directly in front of Isabella. He studied her the way a jeweler studies a stone that might be flawed. Then he tapped her shoe again with the falcon head. "Pour for me, little bird," he repeated in the ancient dialect, probing. "And don't tremble, or I'll teach the Hudson how to swallow another secret." Isabella felt 200 eyes nail her spine. She could have stammered. She should have stammered. Instead she raised her chin, just enough, and answered in flawless, archaic Aspremont. "The Hudson is already full of secrets, Don Antonio. One more frightened bird won't make it sing." The room became a tomb. Luca's tray hit the floor in a silver explosion. A sommelier's bottle shattered against marble. Dante's head whipped around so fast his neck cracked audibly. Don Antonio Greco, the man who had outlived 6 governments and 4 assassination attempts, actually swayed. For the first time in half a century, the architect of silence looked like he had heard his own obituary. Isabella's pulse roared in her ears. She had just answered in the forbidden tongue. She had just named herself the last living Greco. And she had just painted a target on her own forehead. She spun and bolted for the servers' corridor. "Take her," the Don barked, cane slamming the floor hard enough to crack tile. Dante was already airborne, vaulting the mezzanine rail, landing in a crouch, sprinting after the girl who had just spoken to his father like an equal. Isabella crashed through the kitchen doors, past stunned line cooks, and shoved out the loading dock into driving rain. She didn't slow. She ran the way she had run once before, at 13, when black cars rolled up the mountain road and her childhood ended in gunfire. She vaulted a dumpster, scrambled a fire escape, dropped into the next block, and vanished into the Friday night crush on Atlantic Avenue. Behind her Dante skidded into the alley, Beretta already drawn. Left. Right. Nothing but rain and taillights. She was smoke. Back inside La Lanterna the atmosphere was more cold. The dining room had been emptied. Staff herded into the walk-in. Dante returned soaked and empty-handed. Vincenzo Rossi sat motionless at the head table, untouched Barolo in front of him.
He looked diminished.
She spoke the mountain tongue, he said to Dante, voice barely above a whisper.
Not just Calabrian. The old code.
The Greco code.
Dante's jaw locked. The Grecos are gone. You ended them.
I thought I ended them, Vincenzo corrected, voice cracking like dry wood.
In 2002.
The night we raised the farm above Gambari.
We found a child's body. Dental records matched.
But records can be bought.
Dante stared. You're saying she's Isabella Greco?
The daughter who supposedly died at 13. If she is, Vincenzo said, she has spent 7 years pouring my wine in my own restaurant.
Waiting. Watching.
And tonight, she answered me as though I was still a guest in her father's house. Dante felt the floor shift beneath him. The Greco clan had been the only bloodline that ever seriously contested the Rossi supremacy in Calabria. When Vincenzo eradicated them, he believed he had purchased permanent peace. But if one girl had escaped the fire,
she could have poisoned me any night, Vincenzo murmured. She could have opened my throat while I ate osso buco.
Why wait? Because a quick death is mercy, Dante said slowly. She wants you to watch the empire you stole turn to ash first. Vincenzo met his son's eyes, haunted, almost pleading.
Find her, Dante.
Before the other families realize a Greco still breathes. If they rally behind her, the old war wakes up. And this time, we may not survive it. Dante nodded once, already turning for the door.
But deep in his chest something unfamiliar stirred. He wasn't going to hunt Isabella Greco to kill her. He was going to find her.
Because for the first time in his life the Prince of New York had met someone who made him feel small.
And he needed to know why.